Hey guys, tonight we find ourselves navigating the precarious cobbled streets of a medieval town where the damp air clings to your skin as dawn paints pale light across crooked rooftops. You're not a knight or a noble, but a thief. The whispers of the town, a shadow slipping through alleys. Your life is laden with the thrill of stolen coins and the eternal cat and mouse game with the town guard. Your jaunts across rooftops and narrow passages require an agility as sharp as the dagger you conceal in your belt. But alas, this life often ends early. Reaching 23 would be quite the miracle. You probably won't survive this, but that's the thrill of the tale. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, why not share where you're tuning in from? And the time on your clock. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your current haunt is a bustling market, the perfect hunting ground. Merchants shout their wares, while beggars position themselves strategically to catch the occasional tossed coin. Pies cool on wooden stands, their scents mingling and wafting among the crowd, a distraction to your true intent. You blend into the flow of townsfolk, your fingers deftly lifting a purse here, a shiny bauble there. Today you're lucky you're tempted to use some of the goods to barter for food. The marketplace is a colorful tapestry of sounds and scents. Fishwives with loud voices and wary eyes, smiths displaying iron tools gleaming under the sun. All part of this living brazen web you've learned to navigate with precision. The trick is to remain nondescript. Another thread spun into the vibrant cloth. Though historians still debate whether thieves like you were more feared than the brigands prowling the roads outside these walls. Your livelihood depends on quick wits and quicker feet, and you catch yourself wondering if you'll ever tire of the adrenaline that courses through your veins each time you slip something into your pockets unnoticed. Tonight the moon is a pearl in a velvet sky. You're beneath it, crouched in shadows by the town hall waiting. There's a rumor of a traveling dignitary bearing wealth enough to fund your escapades for a time. Your breath is steady, and you remind yourself that this kind of score requires patience. The metal of your dagger is cool against your skin, a reassuring reminder that you are armed not only with steel, but with the practiced skill of a seasoned thief. Just as you decide it's time to move, a voice interrupts the stillness, a watchman patrolling when he should be half asleep at his post. You melt back into the recesses of a doorway, your heart a wild drumbeat in your chest. Here a single misstep spells doom. Captured thieves face dark dungeons, or worse if you're seen. And escape becomes as elusive as dew in the morning sun. Your moment comes swiftly, a glint of gold and silks in the moonlight. The dignitary passes, surrounded by the rhythmical clanking of his entourage. You edge closer, becoming another shadow among the many, your sights set on a bulging pouch that dances tantalizingly at his side. At this juncture, you can't afford to second-guess your timing or your courage. In quick succession, the world becomes a series of slowed images, your hand reaching out with practiced calm, the pouch in your grip, a shout piercing the night. Run. You're off with the wind, feet pounding on cobblestones, carrying you through a maze of alleys where you know every twist and corner like the lines on your palm. Yes, it's a precarious life one, where freedom is measured by the sharpness of your wits and your ability to evade capture. Yet there's a strange kind of beauty in the understanding that every stolen moment, every close call, makes you acutely alive. Historians may argue whether thieves were despised or romanticized figures of the time, but you know you're part of the undercurrent that pulls the strings from the shadows. There's scarcely time for rest, but in those rare moments when you find a quiet nook to conceal yourself from prying eyes, you catch a glimpse of the world that you're constantly eluding, a world both hostile and endlessly fascinating in its complexities. Underneath your rugged layers, you're someone who dreams of loftier things and savors small victories. And so as the night deepens, you remain a part of this story of survival and intrigue. Keeping your senses keen, your encounters with danger, frequent, you are left to wonder how long you'll dance this dance, always one step ahead of the law and fate itself. But for now, daylight creeps into the streets, and you seize a moment's reprieve, a pause that revitalizes and prepares you for the next chapter of your secretive life. With each heartbeat tethered to the rhythm of the night, you're yourself a ghost of these ancient streets, whispering echoes of a life lived on the edge. In the chilled air of a dusty alleyway, you tread softly each footfall, muted against the cobblestones. The sun hangs low, casting long shadows that stretch like fingers reaching across the street. You're caught in the vivid dance of twilight, that liminal space where day fades into night. It's a world that feels almost separate, ever so slightly removed from the familiar bounds of time. Here in the softening light, you sense the restless undercurrents of a city at the brink of slumber. You find yourself wandering through a place painted with struggle and survival, not merely etched upon faces, but baked into the very brick and stone. It's a neighborhood that whispers stories of hardship with each creak of a worn wooden door and each muted conversation behind cracked windows. Tonight we delve deeper into these stories, exploring why some souls pressed hard by life's edges chose the shadowy path of thieving. The streets wind like tangled yarn, and as you maneuver through them, you can't help but notice the juxtaposition. Children play barefoot in the road, their laughter ringing bright and clear like a bell cutting through the gloom. Nearby, a mother calls them home, her voice, a beacon that pierces the ambiguity of approaching darkness. In such circumstances, one's choices are often constrained, shaped less by desire than by the relentless demands life imposes. Consider yourself in this setting not as an onlooker, but as a part of it. The options available to you seem as limited as the contents of your dwindling purse. Work is grueling, yet offers little reward. Wages are thin as the broth ladled out at the soup kitchen. Historians argue endlessly over precise figures, but there's agreement that the gap between work and sustenance felt unbridgeable to many, forcing their hands in directions they never intended to venture. The stark reality we're painting here isn't birthed from a youthful impulse of rebellion. Instead, it's an escalation of necessity, a response to a world that seems to turn a deaf ear to humble pleas for mercy. The honest labor you undertake feels Sisyphean, day after day pushing a boulder of toil up a hill with scant hope of ever reaching the summit, only to watch it roll back again with the dawning of each new day. As you pause to absorb this reality, a peculiar anecdote comes to mind. There was once a rumor that some cunning folks possessed the delectable ability to grow money. Absurd as it sounds, the idea was simple buried coins, supposedly sprouted into more. You can almost hear the collective sigh, a wry shared understanding that such tales live only in the buoyant world of fantasy. And yet here among the street hawkers and candle makers, ingenuity persists. Those driven to thieving became adept not merely at slipping unseen through shuttered windows, but at reading the ebb and flow of fortune. Was it a noble pursuit? Hardly. Was it necessary? In the harsh, unyielding grip of poverty, perhaps. Illuminated by the forlorn glow of a nearby lamplight, you sense a shift in the air. There's a quiet camaraderie in shared hardship, a whispered promise of survival against the odds. The path out of the alley takes you past shadows, where men and women huddle together, discussing plans, exchanging bits of wisdom, how to elude detection, which parts of town are ripe for the picking, and more pliable than others. Listening in an unusual detail makes you pause. There's talk of a particular guardian spirit of thieves, revered amidst the lower orders, a curious blend of mysticism and street smart invoked to bless their nightly ventures and keep misfortune at bay. Whether such a guardian exists is debatable. What matters here is the solace belief offers flimsy, yet often all one can cling to when hope wanes thin. Reflect on this world for a moment. Choice is bound not to the allure of crime, but to a need for food, warmth, and shelter for families. It's an unsettling reflection, one that nudges you to consider your judgments carefully, empathetically. As the night unfolds, an unexpected calm blankets the district a temporary peace. The scene before you softens, street lamps spilling pools of honeyed light across doorsteps, worn hollow by the weight of countless footfalls. You hear it a compelling hum in the distance. The city, despite its hardship, breathes steadily, possessed of a resilience as enduring as the brick and mortar itself. We step carefully, knowing the path is littered with choices shaped by necessity. The quietude of this nocturnal world grows its story, weaving gently into the fabric of night. And as you find your place within its narrative, you begin to understand there's a rhythm to this life, unrelenting yet alive with the persistent echo of survival. A rhythm that in all its roughness cradles you, offers you a moment's rest within the tumultuous cadence of history. You find yourself in a world where the simple act of surviving can paint you with a label that's hard to scrub off. As the warm glow of moonlight spills over cobblestone streets, you navigate this night's difficult choices. It's surprising how a society on the brink of desperation can twist small acts into grand declarations of character. You casually stroll past a bakery, the smell of fresh bread tickling your senses. Here, in these challenging times, even a chunk of bread might feel like a treasure. Leaning against the window, You wonder if you were to liberate a loaf unnoticed, would it make you a monster or merely someone unwilling to starve? Historians still debate whether tales like these exaggerate or understated the harsh conditions of medieval streets. But as you'd carefully reach for the fallen apple, lying forlornly by a vendor's stand, you understand how simple it is to step into that shadowy world. To pick it up and bite into it might save you from hunger, yet it's the sort of act that marks you, branding you as that kind of person. The title whispered with disdain by those who look through their windows with an air of superiority. There's almost a lightness in how easily one's reputation might slide towards infamy. It seems, after all, no king's decree or walled fortress could protect reputations from the whispers of a hungry village. You hide in the anonymity of night, unattached to the reputations that seem to cling to others like stubborn shadows during daylight. Each choice in this milieu holds weight. With growing economic schisms, the gap widens between those who thrive and those who simply scrape by. Crime becomes less a deliberate choice and more a necessary evil. Indeed, the sorting of bread from wheat becomes trickier when the city seems to tremble under the common burden of poverty. The wealth others exchange is mostly in gossip and glances currency of those hanging on by threads. Even so, you'd often find there wasn't much worth taking. In this village of half-broken dreams, most houses read like tales of quiet desperation. Bare cupboards, worn shoes, threads unraveling unnoticed. There's an unusual sense of unity and shared hardship. Neighbors might not have much to give, but the sad reality is that they have less to lose to each other. There are no grand targets here, no noble riches to steal. The once lush markets are worn thin, the tapestry of vibrant life faded into muted colors of necessity and survival. And as you weave between these thin lines of morality, you almost hear the ghosts of those debated scholars, as uncertain as you are about what choice leads to ruin and which ensures survival. At least underneath the open sky, you can navigate by silent stars moving unseen among those shadows, allowing an ephemeral peace to settle over your tired, aching body. As you let go of that stale breath you hadn't known you'd been holding you, glance around, relieved yet cautiously aware of your surroundings, just as the cold stones beneath your feet stay silent. In the quiet of the night, the sound of singing drifts softly from a tavern down the road. Amid the storytelling and the shared comforts of ale, there lies a sanctuary from the outer world. You wonder if stepping inside would bring another label to your reputation, yet you hesitate, caught in the web of your own choices. In this place where loyalty can be bartered for a pint, it becomes comforting knowing everyone is essentially a traveler in the same grand adventure. The irony, however, is that the tale keeps ending where it began: the simplicity of survival, the humanity in little thefts born of need, and the quiet wisdom gathered from living at the edge of night. It is here at this moment where you stand balancing that unseen beam between darkness and light, debating the cost of your next move. And as you linger there in that unmeasured time between breaths, you can't help but wonder if there'll ever be more to this tale than the simplicity of avoiding judgmental stares. In this town, you don't just live through history, you become a part of it etched invisibly in stories carried like whispers, told one cautious night at a time. Perhaps one day you'll find that your tale is worth narrating attentively, accurately manuscript by hesitant manuscript, to those eager for bedtime stories, long after this chapter closes. You find yourself in a medieval town where cobblestone streets twist through shadowy alleys, like tendrils of some old creeping vine. Your footsteps echo softly as you navigate this world of whispered secrets and flickering torchlight. It's a place where the stars seem a little closer, hanging in the sky like diamonds on black velvet. The air is thick with the scent of wood smoke. And somewhere not too far, a dog barks a low warning growl, rolling upon the midnight breeze. As you move, the challenges of this world present themselves in your pathway. Robbing the homes of nobles, for example, a task fraught with peril. These wealthy folk are not content to rest guarded only by stone walls. They have guards trained to notice the slightest abnormality, and the keen noses of loyal dogs ready to bark or bite any intruder. You find the guards often dour and suspicious, their eyes ever watching. The dogs are even more relentless, scenting you out long before a human could detect your presence. You probably won't survive this, you think with a smirk. It's almost as if every corner you turn is designed to thwart such enterprises, the architecture conspiring against you. Weaving between these challenges, you feel an element of daring in your veins. Would someone in ancient times be foolhardy enough to make an attempt? Perhaps, but survival, you realize, would be miraculous. This world of opulence safeguards itself with intricate nuances beyond mere walls and locks. Yet another avenue for the desperate or greedy might be the church, but they present their own maze of obstacles. Churches are fortresses of faith, fortified by thick doors and heavy locks, not to mention the silent armor of reputation and gossip that discourages wrongdoers. Accusing whispers flutter like leaves in the slightest breeze, and you know that the eyes of the devout are no less vigilant than those of guardsman and hound in the wealthy quarters. You pause and feel the chill of shadows gathering as you recall that the church, as a bastion of spiritual and temporal power, keeps safe many treasures. Historians muse over whether the clergy found more comfort in their divine mandate or the earthly locks upon their doors. Perhaps it's a mixture of both. Who could truly say there's a particular tension between those who seek to protect with spiritual sanctions and those who agree with more practical methods? Feeling each bark lock and whispered warning press in on you, you wander further into what seems a quieter part of this medieval realm. There, beneath the watchful eyes of the moon, lie the graves, holding still secrets and ancient whispers. They present another risk altogether, the allure of which was never material, but bound in superstition and fear. Grave robbing, a practice as old as the act of burial itself, mingles dread with desperation. Whispers of dark magic taint those who dare disturb the resting dead. The practice draws a shadow across one's soul, or at least such tales are spun. Are they mere stories woven to scare away bold thieves, or do they hold grains of truth? It is a mystery some historians toy with, yet certainty is elusive. Unease prickles at the edge of your consciousness as you imagine the task not just the physical act of desecration, but the spectral suspicions that hang heavy in the air. Imagine the unfathomable reach of accusations, thicker and more implacable than any chain or lock. To be caught could mean more than mere imprisonment or societal exile. It might mean being marked forever as one who consorts with malevolent forces. A shiver dances down your spine, foolhardy indeed, as you cautiously step deeper, tracing the line between this world and one of spectral whispers. You notice how graveyards protected, not just by stone gates, but perhaps by something broader. Taboos, traditions, beliefs serve as their own formidable barriers. These protections are less tangible but oh so potent, prompting unease in even the stoutest trespasser. And as you amble through this historical tapestry, weaving in and out among intrigue-cast byways, the lesson becomes clear. History drapes itself in as many myths and truths as there are stars in the sky. You are left to wonder about the paths folk have walked before you and the steps you might take next in this ancient dance of secrets and stories. You drift into a curious tale where stealth and shadow beckon the romantic allure of thieving like an anti-hero capturing your imagination. With each soft footfall upon ancient cobblestones, you fancy yourself slipping through moonlit lanes, a glint of mischief in your eye. The art of thievery calls not just to take, but to elude, to blend invisibly into the fabric of the night. Yet dreams can sputter against reality's stone wall. You feel the enchantment begin to unravel as something too tangible shatters the fantasy, a faint whiff in the air, somewhat pungent, a shadow of unnoticed grime that clings stubbornly to you. The perfect disguise isn't just in the cloak, but also within your very aura. Any unkempt detail could prove disastrous. You see the thieving elite of history didn't just hide in the dark, they perfected it. Take, for instance, the infamous Arthur Barry of the early 20th century, who was known not only for his impressive hauls, but also his meticulous appearance and charm that belied his thieving skill. Your senses stray back to the present, the scorched odor of unwashed fabric and the earthier tones of a living space that hasn't been blessed by a broom in recent memory. Surprisingly, historians remain unsure if smell was ever a common betrayer among legendary thieves, but its potential impact cannot be dismissed. A cat burglar, no matter how skilled, would never slip undetected with a scent trailing like a phantom whisper. Consider this odd historical footnote. During the blossoming Renaissance, perfumed handkerchiefs became an unexpected ally to both genteel and rogue alike, masking the body odors that would otherwise signal their presence. Ironically, while some gossip among scholars suggests that the precise concoction of scents used remains unknown, you ponder over this simple yet essential detail. You spirit away in your story, chuckling at the irony of it. The world of stealth and cunning includes its share of unexpected challenges. The simplest act of cleanliness overlooked transforms into a herald, to onlookers a declaration that someone perhaps not of noble intention is near. As you venture further, the tale expands a lavish mental tapestry of heists and escapes your every move calculated, like the cunning hermit frogs of distant rainforests who deceive with camouflage and odor. Cover you recognize that achieving true stealth borders on artistry. You imagine crafting a subtle blend of forest and wind-swept air, in some apothecary's shop to cloak your presence, your mind, filled with scents both pleasing and pragmatic. Despite the humor lurking within these notions, the importance of presentation in your secret endeavors seems less a jest than a crucial lesson. After all, even modern thieves are known to leave telltale signs. Consider the unusual case where burglars were identified using their body odor. In the early days of forensic science, an unexpected tool in the policeman's arsenal at the dawn of the 20th century. You let this amusing history carry you further, appealing to the side of you that thrills in complication and cleverness. Whether you peer through bedroom windows or listen at locked doors in your tale, you're reminded of the difference between imagining yourself as a master of obscure paths and truly walking them. It's the details, the overlooked and mundane, that make a legend. As the murmur of your thoughts slows and reality intertwines with fantasy, the moonlit paths begin to soften into sleep. You let the cloak upon your shoulders become heavier, warmer, like a comforting blanket that cocoons you. The night grows deeper, painting the surroundings with the gentle hue of dreams, not reached through stealth, but by the embrace of a calm and soothing night. An unexpected lesson for the would-be thief. The quietude of rest might just be the treasure found tonight. The dogs of the village were something else, you think, as you wander under the ancient trees. Their loud barking could slice through the midnight air like a knife, making it nearly impossible for anyone with less than innocent intentions to sneak about unnoticed. These dogs, whom you lovingly dub furry snitches, seem to form the perfect vigilant team. They're quick with speeds that could rival the fastest runners, and their tails filled with life wag, not only to announce joy, but to herald an intruder's presence just as efficiently. As you stroll along the cobblestones, you begin to appreciate how the villagers cherish these clever creatures. Each dog holds a place in the hearts of its owner and the broader community. They're seen as protectors, family members, and even confidants in this close-knit society. The villagers believe the dogs understand more than they let on, perhaps carrying secrets of the village like a well-guarded code. Historians ponder the origins of this endearing canine phenomenon. Was it the relentless invasions centuries ago that cemented the dog's place as protectors, or an even older tradition lost to time? You hear tales passed from generation to generation, stories laced with heroics and legend, where a single dog warned of impending danger, saving families, or even whole villages. These historical whispers are woven into the fabric of everyday life here. You consider that there might have been a time when people saw them as just pets, but today they are heralded as essential, not only for their protective abilities, but for their charm and companionship. It's amusing to think that despite their loyalty and affection, these furry snitches tend to hold grudges longer than memory itself. Like the time Bruno the golden retriever caught young Timmy sneaking out past his curfew. Months later, Bruno could still be heard muttering his complaints through a series of ruff and arfs. There's a debate among the residents and even visiting scholars about the intelligence of these dogs. Do they plot their patrols like a strategic game of chess, or is it all instinct? Whatever the case, you can't help but chuckle at their antics, marveling at how these seemingly simple creatures command such respect. The moonlight guides your steps, reflecting off the polished lanterns that line the path like guiding stars. Each step brings you closer to those titular tales and eager barks you hear ahead. Tonight the air is thick with possibility, as if the stories you heard earlier are waiting just around the corner, taking shape among the shadows. Just as you're deep in thought, envisioning the era when these creatures first gained their fame, you stumble upon a family enjoying a late evening chat beside a simmering fire. The dog of the house, a regal German shepherd with wise eyes and an aura of command, sits poised at their feet as part of the family, as the wood-paneled house behind them. You acknowledge the gentle irony that while these dogs are celebrated for their ability to foil mischief, they still indulge in a fair share of it themselves. You imagine this scene within the wider spectrum of history, how in times past, these fireside gatherings, complete with a diligent dog keeping watch, have been a cornerstone of comfort and security. Families would share tales of old, perhaps of ancient Rome, where dogs were cherished guardians, or wilder chases through the rolling hills that still guard their secrets. Another barking outburst echoes from the other side of the village, guiding your thoughts back to more personal stories. You recall when you first arrived in the village. You felt the eyes of these four-legged guardians sizing you up, appraising you with that unnerving dog-like wisdom. Gradually, they came to accept your presence, though you might never live down that first misstep involving a misplaced sandwich, all forgotten, except by one enterprising beagle whose nose still twitches at the scent of your passing. The night grows deeper stars, shimmering like a silver crust over velvet darkness, and the path meanders toward the quieter part of the village. The gentle rhythm of crickets underscores the distant howls, a nightly symphony that the villagers seem to treasure. You realize that each dog's bark is part of a larger, endless conversation, one that bridges the villagers, the land, and the stories that time can never really erase. This interconnected web of tales and barks continues to weave as you imagine the dogs on their nightly rounds. In a world constantly changing, they've remained a reliable constant, bridging the past with the present, always faithful. As you begin to turn home, you recognize this relationship as not merely one of practicality, but a profound partnership bonded over the ages. And so with these thoughts leading your path, you acknowledge the dogs as sentinels, not just in the night, but guardians of tradition, protectors of a way of life, both resilient and comforting. Perhaps that's why their short legs can chase you faster than you ever think possible, and why their voices can both reassure a village and send a chill down a stranger's spine. Embraced by this cozy blanket of stories and gentle, loving wags, the village settles into another quiet night, snug under the watchful gaze of its cherished protectors. In the whispered shadows of a tranquil moonlit village, you find yourself exploring the peculiar world of medieval homes. Picture these houses not only as places of warmth and shelter, but also as strongholds of cunning and ingenuity. The sun has long set, leaving a silvery glow on the cobblestone streets. As you sneak along the path, you notice that these quaint abodes are unlike anything you're familiar with today. It becomes clear that locks are a rarity in this world. Wooden doors, though strong, lack intricate mechanisms of security. But fear not, for the clever minds of these villagers have devised their own means of protection. Just as you're considering how easy it might be to waltz into one of these homes, you remind yourself that in reality, you probably won't survive this unscathed. Historians paint a vivid picture of these homes being fortified with makeshift traps, each serving as a silent sentinel to guard against the unwelcome. As you tiptoe closer to one door, you notice its telltale creak, a subtle, strategic noise. The sound itself is a force field ready to alert anyone within to your presence. An unsuspecting breeze could trigger a symphony of jingling bells carefully strung above. You can almost hear them somewhere in the still night air, a tinkling chorus calling out, "Intruder." Branches and twigs become cunning foot soldiers left scattered on paths leading to entrances. One wrong step and they crack underfoot with a sound loud enough to wake the entire household. Imagine, too, the local geese more than just honking, waddling distractions. These creatures are your would-be foes, guarding the property with a vigilance that no modern-day security system can match. It all seems a bit excessive until you consider the stakes. In an era where possessions and livelihoods were hard-won and easily lost, such ingenuity was necessary. One historical account might lead you to believe that each ploy seems simple, but together they weave a complex tapestry of defense, as intricate as the thought behind them. You wander, further curiosity driving your every step. There's an unexpected charm in these homes, a blend of primitive and poetic. Despite the potential turmoil that a false step or an unexpected honk might bring, the same chaos creates a melody only those attuned to the past can truly appreciate. Every misplaced twig is like a note in an ancient score, the vibrations echoing long after the sound ceases. While some historians debate the exact origins of certain defensive practices, the prevailing notion remains clear. Necessity was the mother of invention. The villagers crafted security around their homes with materials they had on hand, turning ordinary items into extraordinary guardians. Here in this narrative, you're not just an observer, but a participant. You can feel the pulse of the past under your fingertips, and your heart beats in time with the rhythm of this strategic dance. You may even pause to imagine yourself as one of these resourceful inhabitants stepping over the creaky threshold with practiced ease. As you explore the idea further, you begin to see these tactics as more than security measures. They represent a deeper sense of community and shared understanding, a language unspoken yet deeply heard. And while you may have dodged some brilliant traps along the way, tonight there's a quiet reassurance in knowing that everyone's watchful gaze contributes to the safety and trust that holds the village together like an unbreakable bond. You are crouched low in the shadows, the dim flicker of a candle, painting a dance of light and dark across cold stone. You can hear the soft rustle of straw as medieval families stir restlessly in their one-room homes. It's the 14th century, a time when personal space was a curious concept yet to be invented. You pull the wooden door closed quietly behind you, The rough-hewn planks groan slightly in protest, a sound at odds with the night's stillness. Inside, the family slumbers light and uneasy, scattered about the room like players on a stage poised to leap into the next act. Everyone found a spot on the floor beneath a thatched roof that creaked with the wind's whims. Blankets, if you could call them that, were made of old cloth scraps, sewn haphazardly together, a patchwork of necessity rather than luxury. Your breath catches as you step gingerly over a stout wooden ladle, poised dangerously close to your path. It's leaned against what passes for a cooking pot, but tonight it's a sentinel in this home's makeshift armory. The medieval family might not have slept soundly, but their defenses were always ready. A pitchfork here, a ladle there, a woven gauntlet of everyday weapons. You flash back to strange tales of medieval superstition that insisted restless spirits wandered the nights. Perhaps that is what keeps the father's hand tightly curled around the heft of his pitchfork as he dozes. Your gaze sweeps the room, picking out details that seem amusing by modern standards, but were standard for the times. The hearth, for instance, is central to life, not just a source of warmth, but a heart around which meals are cooked and stories are spun. Such stories may have included a historical fact you recall. In some households, the fire was kept burning continuously day and night, with fear that letting it die might invite misfortune upon the household. As you navigate further into the room, you're struck by an unusual detail. The unusual yet ingenious wooden wheel contraption perched near the door. It's a canopy churn, serving dual purposes as both butter-making equipment and a rather effective deterrent against intruders, accidental or otherwise. With a gentle push, you maneuver around it, careful not to bump the churn and spill the milk, which is precious enough that even a slight loss invites dread. Under a shared roof with no partitions, privacy is as scarce as an out-of-season apple. This lack of walls makes your mission more challenging yet more intriguing. Each family member forms a different kind of hurdle in the room's soft glow. The mother murmurs a soft string of dreams, a lullaby in her gentle rhythms, while a child curled next to her clutches a wooden toy carved with more love than skill. Historians still debate whether these families ever truly achieved relaxation under such conditions. Was it possible to drift securely into dreams when the world remained so unpredictable and perhaps even unfriendly just beyond the door? Even in sleep, these families wore the armor of caution against a shifting society that could deliver news of war, disease, or disaster at any moment. As you maneuver through this carefully balanced scenario, you admire this tableau of a family, each member connected by an invisible thread of togetherness and survival. In a remarkable discovery from some years past, archaeological evidence suggested that, contrary to some modern assumptions, the nuclear family wasn't the universal norm. Extended families often live together, grandparents sharing stories, wisdom, and even space-making, the night air rich with soft whispers and shared warmth. You shift your foot slowly around a pile of neglected cutlery, a curious choice for all-night readiness, but given the scarcity of metals and tools, perhaps even a fork held a hidden menace. Such mundane objects doubled as guardians against the backdrop of threats, perceived or real, like wolves howling in the thickets or footsteps walking the unbeaten path. The paradox of the medieval home's one-room simplicity is that in truth, life bustles within. It's a dance you must continue your path, zigzagging to avoid small and large obstacles alike, each step suggesting a story or practice peculiar to this era. In unison, these elements paint a vivid picture of a time when even sleep carried with it the myths and defenses of a day not long past, blending into the ever-watchful eves of a night encompassed by its own set of rules. The air is chilly yet familiar, its crispness filled with the scent of hay and embers, just barely alive in the hearth. You stand next to the window, a simple cutout shuttered against the night, and breathe it in a capsule of time slipping smoothly through your senses. Eventually, just as quickly as you entered, you find yourself crossing back over the threshold, the door closing with a quiet creak that blends almost harmoniously with the night's chorus. As you step into the open night sky, you're cradled by a tapestry woven from the stars above each one, a beacon guiding you gently homeward through the corridor of history you have just moved through. The night continues its gentle calm, a spell unbroken by the medieval family's stirred dreams, their world safe once again, locked in the security of shared warmth and communal watchfulness. You can almost hear their breath slow their hold on dreams slackening to inhabit the promise of a new day, still a personality of its own. As you walk, the light rhythmic chirping of crickets envelops everything in peaceful monotony, like a gentle lull towards the balm of sleep itself. As the evening gently unfurls like a soft ancient scroll, you find yourself drifting back to a time when punishment was as much about spectacle as it was about justice. Picture yourself wandering through a cobblestone market square, echoing with the murmurs of an eager crowd. The air is alive with anticipation, a cloud of tension, seemingly tangled with the scents of roasting chestnuts and stale ale. There, at the heart of the throng, a sight unfolds that would surely chill anyone to the bone. In the lively days of old, criminals often faced the grim prospect of being marked for life, not just by their deeds, but by searing hot iron branding. The T for thief, or the V for vagabond, a letter of disgrace born on the skin for all to see. Imagine the hiss of iron on flesh, the sizzle of sound that somehow feels both ancient and terrible, while the crowd gazes on some in horror, others in macabre fascination. You stand there wondering if you could ever endure such a thing, a branding that tells your story long after you yourself might choose to forget it. The process was ritualistic and public for a reason. Beyond punishment, it was a lesson in social control, an indelible reminder of one's place, but also a warning to onlookers. Break the laws of the realm, and you might not survive your reputation. But not all were certain the branding was effective in reducing crime. Historians still debate whether such marks became more badges of notoriety rather than deterrence. Some, it seems, proudly wore their brands, much like a soldier might flaunt a scar, a curious fact that illustrates the paradoxical nature of shame and fame. Now linger a little longer in the square as you notice the stocks standing nearby, waiting silently for their next occupant. unlike branding stocks invited community participation, albeit not the kind one might enjoy. Wooden boards clamp around neck and wrists, forcing the miscreant to bend and bow in uncomfortable penance as citizens took turns offering jeers or crude amusements. Some empathetic souls might grace the offenders with a piece of old bread or some water, but others were less kind. You wonder if any visitor ever whispered a kind word to the accused, a gentle something, lost in the noise of derision, a small, surprising act of unseen defiance against the ritual. For hours, maybe even days, perpetrators remained locked in those uncomfortable positions, exposed to the elements and the disdain of the masses. The stocks not only punished, but also aimed to rehabilitate by exposing one's misdeeds in a manner so public it ensured the weight of consequence felt physically imposed upon the offender. Yet you wonder, as those historians do, did this repeated public humiliation really instill desired virtues or merely reinforce other social divisions? You stand there reflecting on how branding and stocks have become scarcely more than dark corners in history books, best shared under whispered breath around flickering candlelight, their stories sprinkled with both fascination and unease. Over time, their use dwindled, debated out of existence, leaving behind only echoes of punishment past. Breathing in the coolness of the fictive night, scented with the decay of nocturnal damp, you find yourself walking away from the spectacle footsteps softened by the moss-laden paths of history. Behind you, as the branded and stock-bound are left, life continues, as it always does, a hum of traders' gossips and the ever-threatening march of time. The moon, bold and watchful above, perhaps holds the secrets of those ancient punishments in its silent light, bathing the town in a serenity those marked souls, outcast yet again by society's norms, would never fully reclaim. And as you tread away with a sense of wonder mingled with sorrow for the past, you understand that these tales linger mysterious and provocative within the twilight, between forgetfulness and remembrance. It's a complex dance, a journey through the macabre and misunderstood paths of history, where fiction dims the harshness of the truth, just enough to usher you quietly toward rest. You find yourself walking through a dusty village, a fictional place where justice is meted out in ways that might baffle and intrigue you. A gentle breeze rustles the faded banners hung between crooked buildings, and in the center stands a wooden post, well worn from years of use. This is where locals gather to decide the fates of their peers, a place where punishment and mercy dance an unsteady waltz together. In this village, flogging is seen as a merciful punishment. It might sound severe, the thought of being whipped for what today might be considered a mere misdemeanor, but in this time and place, it's considered a kinder alternative to the numerous other medieval forms of punishment. Instead of taking a life or removing a limb, a series of lashes ends at the edge of suffering, the physical scars, seen as a necessary reminder of wrongdoing. Historians still debate whether this punishment truly offered mercy amidst the chaos, or if it simply masked a more insidious form of cruelty. As you stand amongst the villagers, you notice how decisions here aren't made behind closed doors or inside grand courthouse halls. Instead, trials are held in the open under the watchful eyes of the community. Justice is raw and tangible, like the rough ropes on the flogging post. The accused stand in a makeshift circle formed by villagers, their fates decided by the crowd's shouting. The louder the voices, the more likely a guilty verdict, a practice strange enough to make you question how fairness could ever emerge from such chaos. Yet there's an odd sort of order to the madness, much like the way waves shape a beach. The community, bound together by their shared fear of punishment, must negotiate what is just through this bizarre means of consensus. One unusual detail whispered among the villagers is the belief that the volume of one's defense or accusation could be enhanced by consuming a special herb, an odd relic of superstition meeting the crude practice of mob governance. It's hard to imagine this happening today, but here in this village, reality is louder and more ruthless than any courtroom drama. The chaotic nature of their system, while baffling, has evolved to serve its own purpose, even if at first glance it looks impossible to navigate without the certainty of modern laws. Was it fairness they sought, or simply a resolution to their immediate needs? The methods may have been noisy and chaotic, but the desire for community harmony remained apparent. And so as you leave behind the clamor of judgment, you sense the undercurrent of human resilience and adaptability. The flogging post stands as a solitary reminder of the past this village clings to, wrapped in rituals both ancient and rudimentary. This place teaches you that justice is not always neat or logical, but it grows from the seeds of shared fear and understanding, just like those banners fluttering in the breeze over your head. As you wander away, you are enveloped by the dusk of a quiet field, the noise of the village fading behind you like the soothing hum of a fan. There is peace in the solitude, a stark contrast to the bustling scene you left. The path ahead is soft under your feet, offering comfort, much like the blanket you'll soon pull up over your shoulders. This journey through time, as jarring as it was, invites a kind of reflection on the imperfect quest for justice, leaving you gently pondering the resilience of the human spirit then and now. Drifting into the embrace of night, you close your eyes to the world, reassured by the continuity of history and the humbling recognition that every age finds its path to justice, however winding or imperfect it may be. Just as you feel the uneasy cobblestones beneath your feet, the shadowy figures emerge from the foggy edges of the narrow street. The ancient town's passageways are as twisted and labyrinthine as a spider's web designed to ensnare and confuse. Fleeing becomes an intricate dance as you zigzag through alleyways barely wide enough to stretch your arms, the uneven stones slick with thick mud from the day's rain. These streets, formed through centuries, have witnessed many more tales than anyone could recount. Stories of pilgrims, merchants, and thieves all blend into one. You might imagine that the very stones beneath you could whisper secrets of past escapes and pursuits. But tonight belongs to you, and these elusive streets present a formidable challenge in your quest for freedom. The village awakens with a kind of electric excitement, as if the night is a game, and you are the unwitting participant in a medieval sport. Children giggle as they peer out from wooden shutters, and adults with lanterns in hand begin the chase. There's a kind of begrudging respect in their eyes, a nod to the timeless dance between pursuer and pursued. Historians still debate whether these chases were more about justice or mere entertainment. It seems half the town finds the spectacle as enjoyable as any harvest festival, and there's an undeniable thrill in their eyes. You sprint through the mud that clings to your shoes like those tangled stories weighing you down with the burden of every misstep. The air is thick with the scent of earth and anticipation. You hear the shouts echo off the stone walls, each call blending into a symphony of chaos, urging you onward faster. Among those who run alongside you in this desperate bid for escape loyalties are as fluid as the rivulets of rainwater coursing down the street. More often than not, betrayal is just another survival tactic. Whilst you glance over your shoulder, there's a flicker of recognition in a fellow fugitive's eyes. The unspoken pact of bandits is as fragile as the fine mist through which you run. Trust is as transient as the moonlight that dances in puddles at your feet. It's a peculiar dance, this life of thievery and survival. As you duck into an alley, a tangle of crates, providing a brief moment of cover, you can almost feel the history seep through the brickwork. Did those historic cobblestones once support another like you, a rogue or rascal, who believed in the freedom of choice more than the chains of order, the enigmatic tales that could be spun if only these stones could speak? Tonight, as you move with haste and desperation, there's an amusing thought that maybe tomorrow you'll be a part of someone's bedtime story, a cautionary tale for wide-eyed children tucked under thick blankets, a reminder of the dangers that loiter just beyond the pages of an old storybook, the chase intense and seemingly endless flares in the heart of the medieval village. It's been said that in these times, just like now, the only currency that truly mattered was speed, your feet your only savior. If you falter, the mud would be quite literally your downfall. You can almost hear the historical echoes, the tales of those who once ran faster, those who were caught, those who vanished like whispers in the wind. Around a bend, you slide, nearly losing purchase, breath coming in sharp bursts as you push harder against the calls and laughter that pursue you. There is an unusual comfort in this ancient pursuit, a recognition that history unfolds in cycles. Your fight echoes through time, a never-ending tale of survival that began long before you and will continue long thereafter. You realize that here in this eternal twilight of pursuit, personal tales of betrayal and loyalty are as old as time itself. History is littered with those who have turned upon each other. Judas is but one name in a litany spanning centuries. Trust is a luxury few can afford here, where a slight misstep can upend even your most cautious of plans. And as you speed through this tangle of past and present, the echoes of distant betrayals ringing in your ears, you wonder whether historians will ever truly understand the complexities of such lives shaped by harsh streets and harsher choices. Your feet carry you onward through the sleepy market square, littered with remnants of another day's trade. Smells of stale bread and lingering spices blend with the damp night air, a patchwork of life amidst the chaos of the chase. Underneath this canopy of stars, the timeless chase feels almost reassuring in its predictability. Shadows shift and blend as lanterns flicker, casting long, slender phantoms across your path. Somewhere beneath those stars, the tale of another chase is beginning or ending just like yours. And as you blend into the deepening dark, the clamor of pursuit fades, leaving only the silent testimony of the stars as witness to your passage. In this story of twilight struggle, narrow passages, and ancient intrigue, you continue carving your path into the endless fabric of history. You step into the dim world of the past, walls thick with stone, and the air heavy with an earthy, damp chill. This isn't the clean, scripted version of history you've seen in movies. The prisons we explore tonight are far from the modern, towering structures of concrete and steel. Instead, they're more akin to underground pits, rudimentary and dark. You feel the worn, slippery stones underfoot, cold and damp, whispering the tales of those who came before you. The air, almost unbreathable, is filled with the echoes of time, sorrow, and stories untold. Here, the idea of punishment is somewhat anachronistic. These spaces exist not so much to sentence those within to pain and suffering through physical torments or lengthy stretches of time alone, but rather to simply hold individuals in a stasis of uncertainty. These prisons are holding cells more than anything else. Historians still debate whether the conditions were intended as part of the punishment, or merely the inevitable byproduct of medieval architecture. Inside these cold chambers, you find yourself reflecting on the empire it belongs to, a time when law was less about justice and more about survival of authority. It's a stark contrast to the outside. Their life goes on with vigor, the sun shines and birds chirp, oblivious just like our perception today, happily ignorant of the shadows cast by society's structures. As you navigate through these defensive mazes that serve equally well as imprisoning devices, you're made aware of an execution day. You think with a tinge of grim humor. Perhaps if you were there, a front row seat would be only slightly less desirable than none at all. But with all due respect, you probably wouldn't survive a show like this in your plush, modern indifference. The ultimate penalty, though, was not served here in the prison's dank heart, but rather out in the open, under the sky, where justice, or an age-old facade of it, was visibly served. A public event, it was as dramatic as a theatrical performance. The condemned would be led out the ground below, creaking under footfalls heavy with resigned dread, while onlookers gathered their expressions, a kaleidoscope of human emotion from horror to morbid curiosity, perhaps even entertainment. Hanging wasn't just a straightforward end, it was a public sermon, a visceral message reinforced by the act itself. The rope, a tool so modest in its make, transformed into a symbol of finality. There was a functional elegance to this method, a simplicity that masked its brutality. The executioner, often regarded with a strange mix of fear and necessity, wielded this rope with neither malice nor mercy, just duty. After all, it wasn't personal. It was administrative, a macabre checkbox on society's ledger. As tales of these hangings spread, so too did their details. The shouts of a bustling crowd, the moment the trapdoor gave way, a shared silence, more deafening than the space before a storm. And yet details remain shrouded in the fog of history, with debates and discrepancies among scholars. They ponder each little truth in a tapestry that is at best incomplete. You sense the history stretching beyond the immediate spectacle of these public communal visions of death, all ritual, all consequence, none quite real until witnessed firsthand. It's not just about the execution itself, but the way society has long approached punishment control and deterrence. The ambiance of our shared era allows you to ponder, was this about justice, or was it a means to enforce control through fear, to set boundaries through example, no matter how necessary or grim? Take a moment to reflect on that as you continue navigating through the cold stones where echoes still linger of lives once closed within these spaces. Say, what time is it where you are? Drop a note below and let your thoughts unfurl like the leaves of a poplar in summer's breeze. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your story continues as you find yourself thinking of the actors beyond the prison, those who filled the streets, who came and witnessed each there for their reasons. Perhaps some out of a need for closure, others out of mere curiosity, and yet others because it was simply a part of life. In those days, a communal experience, just as dark and undeniable as the rigid walls of the prison that first held the condemned. As the evening deepens, let these thoughts take root, and as you close your eyes, imagine the gentle rhythm of history's tide pulling you softly back to your own cozy realm. Let it carry you from damp pits and chilling visions to the comfort of your own stories, waiting to be rediscovered come morning's light. As you approach the sleepy cobblestone streets of a medieval city, imagine the night folding softly around you like a velvet curtain. It's quiet save for the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant murmur of a crowd still loitering after the market day. You slip through narrow alleys, shadowy and secret, where only the crafty dare tread after dusk. These are the paths well worn by thieves, those shadowy figures who weave through the city unnoticed. You probably won't survive this era if you choose their path. As infamous as many of these thieves are, history assures us that theirs is not a life made for longevity. Still tonight, beneath the glow of a crescent moon, let's wander through their world for just a moment longer. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Do share your favorite part of the world and what time it is there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine now you're in the shadow-laden corners of the city, blending with rogues who move like whispers through the night. This life is filled with danger at every turn, a reality check that even Hollywood's sleekest heist movies can't quite capture. You navigate with caution, aware of the telltale clink of coins in a well-guarded pocket, as every shuffle of fabric signals a potential danger or opportunity. History shows us that many of these thieves held their own code of honor, as paradoxical as that might sound. Canonical tales speak of Robin Hood-like figures who, whether fictional or real, swore to steal from the rich, to give to the poor. These stories add an alluring layer of nobility to the outlaw's life, turning the drudgery of their daily survival into a kind of social justice. Yet behind these romantic tales lies the harsher truth of a thief's future. We know from countless historical accounts that a life of robbery leads seldom anywhere good. There's no pension at the end of your thieving years, no grand farewell parties. Just as you deftly pick a lock or nimbly navigate the rooftops, you're always aware of that unsettling truth. Spend your nights on the run and your days in fear of capture or betrayal. Informants were a dime a dozen, ready to trade names for their next meal. Historians still debate whether the infamous thief Fu Longjiao of the Song dynasty met his end because of an informant, or was simply caught in a rare slip of dexterity that left him at the mercy of the law. Picture a refuge where thieves might gather, inhaling the tang of rusted metal, mingled with the sweet smell of stale ale, whispering tales of their slick escapades. Yet even here, trust is a luxury you can seldom afford. Paranoia becomes your nightly cloak and suspicion your eternal companion. As the years wear on, gravity pulls harder on your once light feet. With each chase, the fear of that final fall which will come to claim you as it does, all thieves grows heavier. Those who boast of retirement only find themselves begging at the temple steps, battling the indifference of passers-by who forsake them. Perhaps to avoid that ignoble decline, you might consider life as an informant. But trading secrets rarely buys happiness. Instead, it purchases a slightly extended stay in a city that will never truly welcome you. You stand forever on the precipice of betrayal, your loyalty never secure, and your friends few like stars in the city's smoky sky. Yet there's also the option to fade from life at a young age. A quick demise might be a mercy as morbid as it sounds, a way to escape the mounting weight of fears and failures. Perhaps some vanishing act would render you merely a footnote in history's grand ledger, forgotten by all but the stories left behind. As you journey down the moonlit trail of this tale, listen to the night breeze that carries the chimes of church bells, reminding you of time's relentless passage. This world of thieves, full of high stakes and shadows, feels both alluring and relentlessly unforgiving. Here, existence is a tightrope walk over a chasm filled with whispers of defeat. Inside the glow of the lamplight by your bedside, bring to mind the resolve these thieves clung to, and the macabre dance they performed nightly. For all the grandiose fortunes you might dream of, the true wealth here lies in the peculiar camaraderie of shared peril and the fleeting thrill of outwitting fate, if only for a fleeting moment. Such is the life of those who tread the world's silent edges. You find yourself back in your own time, cradled by your own safe haven, where adventures can be paused with the flip of a last page, unlike the endless twists experienced by those of historical notoriety. Breathe in deeply, savoring the safe rhythm of your own heartbeat. A gentle reminder that while tales of thievery dance fascinatively around the edge of fantasy, reality hesitantly reaches out to guide you away from such fateful paths. As this narrative comes to its gentle close, let your thoughts drift into the tender embrace of rest, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow and the myriad stories it will unveil, awaits you with arms wide open, offering a life unshackled by history's shadows, a story that's yours to weave with every dawn's sweet promise. As the gentle hum of the fan lulls you into a tranquil state, you find yourself wandering through the cobbled streets of 19th century Britain, a place bustling with the clinking sounds of horse-drawn carriages and the distant clang of machinery. The air, thick with the scent of coal and ambition, whispers tales of a world on the brink of transformation. Industrialization has cast its spell, changing towns into cities, and simple craftsmen into factory workers, as the very rhythm of life is rewritten by steam and iron. Imagine the hypnotic hiss of steam engines, their pistons pounded like enormous metal hearts. They drive the growth of new industries, and while the change is awe-inspiring, it's also a bit terrifying. The fields you once strolled through under an endless sky are now dotted with towering chimneys and spinning gears. It's a place where you might just lose your mind keeping track of all the rapid changes, not least because this era has also birthed a deep-seated fear of madness, a shadow lurking in the background of progress. You see, in this age of metal and innovation, the human mind is treated with both fascination and suspicion. Madness, once considered a divine curse or a sign of otherworldly connection, is beginning to be seen as a condition to be managed. The swirling fog of rationality and order now demands an explanation for those who wander beyond the lines of sanity. It's here, amidst this swirl of coal dust and cerebral pondering, that the 1808 County Asylums Act is born. You might be tempted to think it sounds like another dreary piece of legislation. You probably won't survive this bureaucratic turn. But it's actually a cornerstone of compassion in an otherwise industrial whirlwind. The act, ostensibly a dry legal maneuver, is an earnest, if not naive, attempt to create more humane conditions for the mentally ill. Historically, those deemed mad were often relegated to squalid prison-like conditions or left to the care of families ill-equipped to manage their needs. But reformers driven by the winds of change envisioned a new kind of sanctuary. Though historians still debate whether the driving force was Enlightenment ideals or a desire to control society's outliers, the County Asylums Act set out to establish mental institutions that were more akin to healing retreats than punitive jails. Picture these early asylums, sprawling edifices set amid rolling grounds where architecture is meant to soothe and rehabilitate. The structural details are surprisingly progressive for their time, large windows that invite light rather than metal bars, gardens for peaceful walks, and music rooms for therapeutic relief. Such idealized descriptions, however, can't mask the reality that these noble goals were not always met. Resources were often stretched thin, and societal attitudes couldn't turn on a dime. Yet this act represented significant progress. It was a time when people began to consider that those suffering from mental illnesses were worthy of compassion and care rather than scorn and neglect. It's a glimpse into the hearts of those who dared to believe that industry and empathy could coexist, even in a world dominated by steam and soot. The air is filled with the clamor of invention, yet beneath this cacophony lies an effort to listen to the more silent voices, the forgotten and marginalized. It's an era where progress is measured not only by the height of factory chimneys or the speed of locomotives, but also by the depth of understanding of the human mind. One surprising detail to emerge from this era is that in some asylums, patients who found their navigations through reality particularly challenging were sometimes given tasks such as gardening the tending of chickens or even the care of bees. The idea behind this unusual practice was that connection to nature and responsibility over other life forms could offer a gentle route back to mental equilibrium, a thoughtful whisper of therapy in a time still learning the vocabulary of mental health. As the horses' hooves clatter rhythmically against the stone streets, and the steam from the city's heart rises into the tapestry of clouds, you find a comforting truth here. The world spins on with its clunky progress, but the wheels of reform in their own way keep pace. People care often in ways that are imperfect but earnest. And while we traverse through this industrial age, the story shelters its hand over the soft glow of humanity, daring to illuminate even the darkest corners. As you walk away from the chaotic symphony of both factories and nature, harmonizing your mind, eases into a soft melody of history's gentle truths. It seems, after all, that the roaring advancement of industry is not the only tale of transformation. In this era, there is also a slow yet insistent churning towards greater compassion and care. A narrative in which you now partake with newfound understanding. You walk through the grand gates of the asylum, the iron archway towering ominously above you. The sound of the heavy gate clanking shut behind you reverberates like a harsh whisper, a reminder of the world outside, fading into an echo. Here, history seems to breathe around you, a living entity filled with stories of those who once walked these halls. As you wander through the dimly lit corridors, you can almost hear the soft murmurs of bygone conversations. The asylums, once intended as sanctuaries for healing, often became the end of the line for many who were deemed inconvenient. Women who defied societal norms or struggled with their roles found themselves here, alongside the destitute, and those suffering from epilepsy, a condition misunderstood and feared. It's a sobering thought as you consider how society once turned its back on those who didn't quite fit into the neatly drawn lines. You pause by a window, the night casting long shadows across the floor, and peer out into the sprawling, neglected gardens below. Imagine the scene a century ago, a vibrant space where patients might have found solace in earth, under their fingernails and fresh air on their faces. Yet as more and more individuals were cast into these institutions, the overgrown paths and crumbling walls told stories of neglect and overcrowding. In this historical setting, light sarcasm seems almost twisted, possibly because in this narrative you can't help but chuckle ruefully at the human tendency to solve complex issues with simplistic solutions. There are tales of asylums bursting at the seams, originally built for a few hundred, now teeming with thousands. People became numbers crammed into tight quarters where privacy was but a forgotten luxury. The conditions deteriorated rapidly, facilities aging alongside their occupants. Historians still debate whether those in charge ever truly believed they were offering help, or if the institutions quickly devolved into convenient repositories for society's uncomfortable realities. As you continue your exploration picturing the past around every turn, you might wonder what it was like to reside in such a place. Glancing at the peeling paint and rusted fixtures, it seems oddly poetic, a stark contrast between the visionary promises of sanctuary versus the grim realities of a pen. You step into a larger room where the echoes of voices seem louder, bouncing off the high ceiling. It was in rooms like this that activities were supposed to bring about understanding and recovery. Yet the sheer crush of people diluted these ambitions, reducing engagement to mere rituals carried out by thinly stretched staff. It's here the idea of patient care itself seems stretched to its limits, becoming an exercise in maintaining order rather than fostering improvement. Surprisingly, amidst these bleak conditions, tales of resilience emerge. There are accounts of friendships and alliances odd and enduring forged amongst the residents. These human connections tell us not only of suffering, but a vital human spirit always yearning for kindness, no matter how deeply buried under layers of despair. As you wander down another hallway observing historical photographs lining the walls, notice how these faces caught in an eternal moment almost speak to you from the depths of time. Each one has a story, a hidden narrative woven into the fabric of these walls. Perhaps a surprising detail catches your eye, an image of an impressive library, heavy tomes lining the shelves. A curious revelation when you consider the forgotten benefit of such establishments, access to knowledge when the world beyond turned its back. Outside, you hear the distant hoot of an owl, a soft nocturnal lullaby cutting through the silence. You begin to feel the weight of historical intrigue meandering into weariness as stories of the past wrap around you like a comforting blanket. The night invites you to slow down, letting the tales you've heard mingle with your thoughts and dissolve into gentle dreams. So now, with these stories gently unraveling into the quiet of night, it's time to let go. Allow the whispers of history to drift away, replaced by the steady rhythm of restful breaths and the soft lull of crickets outside your window. Rest easy, feeling a kind of peace in knowing that history, with all its imperfections and forgotten tales, is just a piece of the greater human experience. One that you've just glimpsed, but will continue to unfold in the stories of tomorrow. And with that thought, you slowly drift off to sleep, letting the night cradle you into a serene rest. As you move through the gentle twilight of the story, you find yourself immersed in an era where the air was thick with mystery ideas and often unpredictable diagnoses. The dimly lit rooms and echoing corridors of 19th century asylums beckon you where thoughts give rise to discoveries, but also to misunderstandings, cloaked in scientific curiosity. On a soft upholstered chair, perhaps one that creaks softly as you settle in, you pause to absorb this atmosphere. In this peculiar world, alienists, the early psychiatrists, hold sway in ways that now seem both remarkable and unsettling. They possess not only the knowledge of a burgeoning science, but also an almost unfathomable power. With a single stroke of authority, they could determine the fate of individuals, often leading them into asylums without so much as a trial. Historians still debate whether this was a necessary step in the evolution of mental health care, or a step too far in the wielding of control over society. You imagine meeting Dr. Jekyll-like figures, who in daylight are revered and in the moonlight shrouded in intrigue. Their diagnoses bear curious names like hysteria and moral insanity. These terms, laced with ambiguity, paint pictures of conditions not yet fully understood. Surprisingly, what we view as certain today, depression, anxiety, bear the same opaqueness in these times. The familiarity of a doctor's gaze peering over the rim of spectacles now carries a weight of judgment that could decide one's freedom. Such vague definitions also reflect the era's moral undertones. Imagine being told that your odd behavior or uncontrolled emotions are not just medical conditions, but moral imperfections, as if your very soul were on trial. Think of the gentle whispers in a room among family members, worried at the prospect of someone being committed for what may simply be eccentric tendencies, much like the whispers one might expect in tales of haunted old houses. Yet within this darkness there are lights of uniqueness. It is here in these shadowy halls of history that we find surprises. For instance, the notion that an alienist could declare someone morally insane might also imply profound empathy for those unfit to navigate rigid societal norms. Strangely enough, this reflects an era of profound transition where science wrestled with age-old beliefs and superstitions. The reality check is stark. Despite their power, alienists themselves were stumbling through a landscape as bewildering to them as to those they treated. Cynicism could argue it was a system bound to exploitation, but on those grounds exists a mystery, the idea that perhaps they saw further than we give them credit today. As you listen, that one fact stands like a lone tree in a winter landscape. Alienists could commit someone with mere opinion, no evidence necessary. This notion makes you consider how far discretion should reach without trial, a subject historians still debate into the wee hours. The sea of an era where understanding of the human mind was an expedition is tranquil, yet turbulent under the guise of the tale they crafted. Soothing as it was where natural remedies met unclear pathologies, it reveals undercurrents of unease. Much like a sea captain navigating uncharted waters, their understanding was always evolving, and the waves never ceased to crash against their vessel of knowledge and power. With a hint of sarcasm, you reflect on how far we've traveled. The rights once fragile as mist are now more substantial, thanks to those voices which pushed the tide forward. One can almost hear the echo of questions left untouched, curious to know if individuals of their time peered into the night, much like you, wondering if future generations would one day find clarity in their confusion. This exploration of vague diagnoses is an invitation to understand an era's intricacies beyond mere numbers and facts. Just as you might recount a dream where the familiar taunts with changes at every turn, this story intertwines knowledge with a gentle reminder of human fallibility, balancing the scales of morality and science in an age where both were still learning to see eye to eye. And within this eternal dialogue of past and present, you nestle deeper into the comfort of tonight's narrative, as if curling into an autumn blanket. You feel the strangeness of another time permeating through stories once buried under dusty tomes, now brought to life by the glow of imagination. as you let these tales wash over you like the softest lullaby. The lines between history and fantasy blur gently, singing you toward rest. You find yourself standing in the dimly lit corridor of an old asylum, the kind whispered about in both ghost stories and grim history. Around you, shadows curl and stretch, cast by reluctant light bulbs flickering overhead. The air is dense with a peculiar chill, like a cold breath floating through the halls. Against this backdrop, the history of this place begins to unfold. Just ahead is a door that groans open to a room where treatments once bordered on the punitive rather than the therapeutic. Imagine a woman sitting in a large, imposing chair with straps snugly wrapped around her to prevent any movement. This is the infamous tranquilizer chair invented by Dr. Benjamin Rush, who believed calming the body would restore mental health. While you might be inclined to think of it as an early version of today's massage chairs, it was quite the opposite. The chair's intended sedative effect was in reality more about enforcing stillness rather than peace, trapping the mind in its anxious loops rather than freeing it. However, if someone craved an aquatic shock to the senses, cold water immersion was the order of the day. Patients were submerged in baths of chilling water, a remedy intended to shock insanity right out of them. One can almost picture the steam rising as these baths become reminiscent of modern spa treatments, but only in imagery, not effect. Such experiences were far from soothing. Instead, they bordered on the harsh discipline reserved for unruly behavior. Electroshock therapy was another tool brandished in treatment rooms. First introduced in the 1930s, it emerged amidst clanking metal machinery and the hum of electricity. A jarring sight, the practice was said to realign the misfiring synapses in the brain, likened in its time to a sort of biological reset button. Historians still debate whether the treatments genuinely held therapeutic value or merely subdued patients into compliance. One of the more macabre prescriptions of the era involved bloodletting, a practice dating back to Hippocrates. This was based on the premise that draining the body of supposed toxins would balance the humors and restore mental clarity. But for many, it only resulted in weakness and more suffering. A grim reminder that curing the body by exsanguination is rarely a cheerful affair. Sedation, though seemingly less invasive, carried its own gravity. Laudanum and other opiates were liberally administered, often enough to induce a stupor rather than relief. Instead of alleviating suffering, sedation drew a heavy curtain over the mind, leaving patients drifting endlessly in their own subdued turmoil. Through these treatments, it's glaringly evident that approaches varied dramatically from our modern understanding of mental health care. Women in particular found themselves frequently subjected to such measures, often for conditions that were deemed less a health issue and more a challenge to societal norms. This unequal experience casts a long shadow upon the histories of so many institutions. Moving further down the corridor, you come across a forgotten courtyard where the air feels marginally lighter. Out here, the notion of treatments transforms, slightly shifting from the punitive indoors to the more rehabilitative, at least in theory. Patients would be encouraged to take in the fresh air a return to nature, purported to soothe the unsettled spirit. This courtyard becomes a small reprieve amidst a series of heavy-handed treatments. If you pause and truly listen, you might hear the echo of forgotten voices once full of curiosity or despair. This blend of past and ritual remains a testament to human resilience, even when misunderstood intentions governed the charge. As the night deepens, the corridor of the asylum continues to unravel its stories that prompt reflection on how far compassionate care has come. Finally, let your mind drift quietly over the whispers of history embedded within these walls, allowing yourself a moment to appreciate the complexity of human endeavor. The journey through this asylum, though steeped in shadows, carries with it the weight of both anguish and hope. Remember in the quiet moments before sleep, that kind of reflection brings a rare peace. As the room around you stills, let each exhale take you deeper into rest, drawing the blanket of night closer around your shoulders. Close your eyes. Listen to the distant hum of memory that fades into the soft background of the universe swirling lightly around you. Imagine a time not so far removed from our own, where grand structures stood at the core of small villages and bustling cities, like asylums designed with precision and purpose, their architecture echoing the ambitions of society to both help and contain. Within these stone walls and soaring arches, you find yourself wandering silently, almost ghost-like, through the long, dimly lit corridors that feel surprisingly alive. The concept of these asylums as disciplinary fortresses might give you a shiver, knowing the aim was both treatment and control. You stroll down a narrow passageway and become fully aware of the watchful eyes from the tiny observation windows, creating a system akin to a panopticon. You feel an odd mix of security and unease, as if under constant supervision, a reflection perhaps of society's ambivalence towards those deemed other. A historical footnote here: these institutions found inspiration in the infamous Bentham's panopticon, a design where prisoners wouldn't know if they were being watched, inciting a disciplined behavior through the fear of unseen observation. You can almost sense the gentle echoes of a past conversation, a curious mixture of philanthropy and repression still reverberating in the cold walls. Passing by a room, you notice the austere decor, each piece of furniture bolted to the floor as if trying to ground the very emotions of its registrants. Your fingers trace the rough texture of the wall as you walk, a tactile map of history. Time seems suspended, weighed heavily by the whispers of those who live their days within these confines. And even now, historians still debate whether these institutions leaned more heavily towards sanctuary or prison. Through an archway, you step into an airing court, a space where fresh air was both luxury and tool of rehabilitation. Here you pause. Around you, a lattice of gardens can be seen, tended meticulously by those housed within the fortress, not as a pastime, but a requirement. The garden, beautiful in its symmetry, serves dual roles, the serenity of its aesthetics contrasting sharply with its purpose as a locus of forced labor. Imagine roses and thorns, colorful blooms that mask the toil of hands that nurtured them day in and day out. You remember hearing that these gardens ironically were thought to instill a sense of order and calm, forcing individuals to reconnect with care and routine. To those on the outside, perhaps it seemed idyllic, a belief in nature's power to heal. However, to those within every turn of the spade, might have felt like just another layer of the fortress they couldn't escape. And yet, did some find solace here, amidst the chorus of rustling leaves and chirping birds? The answer is lost to history, a question blown away with the autumn breeze. You continue through a series of courtyards, each one a whisper from a different time, a witness to both the mundane and the profound. The stone paths underfoot are meticulously laid out, leading you through snippets of stories. Some vivid, others fragmentary, like recalling half-formed dreams upon waking. As you meander, a gentle breeze plays through the hedges, carrying with it the faint, emotion-laden whispers of laughter cries and everything in between. Entering another corridor, you feel the change. It must have been a place for the restoration of the soul. Everywhere you look, there are signs of the past efforts at moral reform and the installation of virtue. Despite the weighty silence, there is a hopeful air, diluted though it may have been at times by exasperation and misunderstanding. Many footsteps have passed this way before you, and the air feels pregnant with their stories. Each step you take echoes the complex dance of discipline and care, a dance that was, and perhaps still is, a part of the perpetual search for balance in caring for the human mind. A paradox mirrored in the labyrinthine design itself, freedom offered through discipline. Though your feet trace the paths of antiquity, your thoughts remain grounded in the present. You can't help but ponder the echoes and lessons, considering how elements of these designs still inform modern standards. Surveillance and care, jostling in an eternal waltz, making for a compelling bedtime tale you'll ponder long after. The air feels different here, like the quiet resolve before a gentle rain. You can almost envision the scenes in your mind, the soft footfalls of a nurse on a nighttime round, or the rustle of leaves in the garden when the wind runs its fingers through them. As the night draws closer, the corridors seem to shift subtly, preparing for another cycle of dreams and watchful solitude. End of text. You find yourself in a dimly lit room, a soft breeze wafting through the open window, the gentle rustle of leaves from the trees outside, lulling you into a state of calm. The glow of street lamps casts long shadows across the room, and as the night deepens, stories from the past begin to unravel, carried on the whispers of history itself. As you shift your gaze to the fireplace, a flickering flame dances, illuminating the walls, adorned with portraits of women from eras long past each, with a story as haunting and vivid as the night sky outside. These are tales of women who, in times not so long ago, found themselves on the brink of society's harshest judgments, a place where independence could lead one down paths that were not always chosen. You see, at times, asserting oneself, embracing personal desires, or even the natural changes of aging like menopause, could be seen as rebellions against the established order. Society then, much like a stern and unyielding parent, sought ways to enforce its rules. Asylums became one of those avenues, ostensibly a place of treatment, but in reality, often a tool for imposing control. Historically, asylums were places meant to house those considered mentally ill. But what defined illness? The more you delve into these stories, the more you realize how the lines were often blurred. Women could be committed for behaviors as simple as not conforming to societal norms, a subtle act of defiance taken as a rebellion. The phantom of madness was invoked with alarming ease. As you close your eyes and listen to the soft hum of bygone voices, imagine a day when a woman speaking too boldly or nurturing desires outside her socially imposed role might find herself labeled as troubled. Perhaps she simply danced a little too wildly for someone's taste. Or maybe she had the audacity to read certain banned books. Each step under the glow of societal scrutiny could land her in places from which few returned unchanged. Historians still debate whether these methods of social control ever truly aimed to help those they committed, or simply sought to maintain societal norms. An unusual statistic reveals that at one point, nearly 1 in every 10 women might face such incarceration in their lifetime. A sobering fact that underscores just how commonplace and systemic this treatment was. As you recline deeper into your pillow, consider the stories of women navigating these shadowy confines of psychiatric institutions. In such places, their tales bleed into one another, a tapestry of resistance, resignation, and sometimes rebellion against an unjust fate. For instance, the story of Elizabeth, a young woman spirited away to an asylum after expressing openly her wish to remain unmarried, her choice perceived as an anomaly to be corrected. Or Margaret, who at the mere mention of pursuing a career outside traditional roles was swiftly deemed hysterical. You can almost hear their whispers, once smothered under the guise of therapy and correction. The surprising details emerge on closer examination, such as treatments involving prolonged isolation, thought to cure the mind, yet often leading to further despair. These halls echoed with the perplexing paradox of their existence, holding within them the seeds of liberation for those who later questioned, revolted, and marked the beginnings of change. As you trace the patterns of these chronicles, one phrase continually surfaces, underlining the uncertainty and complexity of the past. Historians still debate whether it hangs in the air, inviting reflection on how narratives are shaped, reshaped, and often obscured by the fog of time. Your mind drifts towards empathy for these women, and also wonder at the resilience shown in the soft-spoken defiance etched in history's corners. The women who later years would recognize as pioneers, those who dared think differently, even when constrained by society's stern hand, proved to be the kindling for future fires of change. As the night grows quieter, you recall another woman's story, who with unmatched wit navigated the asylum's limitations. Her intelligence, a trait feared rather than admired, became her ally. She penned letters in code, slipping them out through sympathetic workers, her voice finding no silence even behind high walls. The historical narrative is dense with such tales, yet they offer a glimmer of hope, reminding you that where adversity flourishes, so too does an inner strength. Herein lies the heart of the human spirit, resilient, defiant, ever questioning. And as you feel the weight of sleep tiptoeing over your consciousness, remember that this was an era not so distant from our own. We listen to these tales not just as spectators of history, but as custodians of its lessons. They linger not just in words, but in the soft thrum of change, echoing in the corridors of time. Feel the calming embrace of night as it falls over you, as the flames in the hearth finally dwindle to a comforting glow. Let your mind wander freely among the stories yet untold within history's deep, quiet well. Rest easy under the watchful gaze of the past, knowing that those who came before shaped the path leading forward, one story at a time. Time invites you to drift gently into its folds, where each whisper carries the weight and hope of generations. As your eyes adjust to the dim flickering gas lamps lighting the asylum's corridors, you feel the weight of history pressing against your chest. The walls whisper tales of children and elderly souls lost in a system meant to hide them more than help them. You find yourself pausing by a small weathered door. Behind it, you hear the faintest murmur of voices. Within this room, a group of children huddle. They are labeled idiots by the time's harsh standards, victims of a world still grappling with understanding intellectual disabilities. You notice how tiny they seem curled together on makeshift straw beds, their eyes wide, and seeking comfort that rarely comes. One child, a small boy with unkempt hair, clutches a wooden doll, the paint chipped and the face worn, but smiling cheerfully in stark contrast to the grim surroundings. You remember that during this era, estimates suggest that as many as 100,000 individuals were housed in such institutions across the country. Many of these children were institutionalized by families that had neither the means nor the medical knowledge to care for them. Disturbingly, records of their lives or even their deaths were rarely maintained. Historians still debate whether this neglect was a product of intent or sheer ignorance. Your gaze shifts to the room's only window. Through the dusty panes, the garden beyond is just visible by moonlight, a wild, overgrown place that surely holds its own stories. Perhaps once these children were allowed out there to play among the tangled vines, their laughter mingling briefly with the rustling leaves before being swallowed by silence once more. Moving on, you step quietly down the hall toward an area reserved for the elderly, many of whom show signs of dementia. As you enter, you notice an elderly woman seated by a window, gazing out with vacant but not entirely unseeing eyes. Her thin, papery hands smooth the threads of a frayed blanket draped across her knees. The elderly here are often dismissed, their past contributions forgotten in their present confusion. This feels especially poignant within these walls, where lifetimes are distilled to mere whispers of memory, unrecorded and unremarked upon by the world outside. You consider how, despite medical advances, recognition and understanding of dementia are still in their infancy during this period. Every once in a while, a glimmer of awareness crosses the woman's face. She hums a tune you faintly recognize, a song all but forgotten, perhaps a lullaby she once sang in her younger days. You wonder about the life she led before finding herself here, her story an unwritten chapter lost to time. An unusual detail catches your attention, a faded photograph pressed beneath the corner of her blanket. It's of a young couple, smiling brightly into the sun, dressed in the fashions of at least half a century ago. Is this woman one of those figures captured in the prime of life, or is she the photographer who held them in such loving focus? This fragment of her story remains an enigma. Whispers in the air guide you further down the corridor. You pass a nurse carrying a tray awkwardly balanced with cups of murky liquid. Her tired eyes betray a kindness shadowed by systemic neglect. At times, asylums are understaffed and underfunded, their stewards overwhelmed by the sheer number of those in need and the limitations of what care they're able to provide. The nurse does her best to offer solace wherever she can, but her presence is fleeting in the expanded expanse of the asylum. You can't help but notice the way her footsteps echo against the cold, hard floors, reverberating through the building, much like history echoes into the present. Finally, you find yourself back in the central hall, beneath the solemn gaze of a long-forgotten founder painted in a grim portrait. Historians still ponder whether his intentions were philanthropic or merely pragmatic, a place for those deemed undesirable by society's rigid expectations. Standing in this place of forgotten stories and fragmented lives, you feel a profound sense of melancholy, but also empathy. It's a reminder of humankind's tendency to overlook those who cannot advocate for themselves. Despite centuries of advancement, these themes resonate with modern struggles, how we care for the most vulnerable among us. The wind outside picks up, carrying the faint scent of rain, a soft pattering, beginning to sound against the faintly rattling window panes. It's as if the world outside seeks to join in the quiet lament of those left within these walls. As the night deepens, you sense the stories you've glimpsed here beginning to fade, taking their rightful place back within the shadows. Your heartbeat seems to slow in tandem with the raindrops, the soft rhythmic drumming providing a soothing lullaby. The corridors grow quieter, as if the very building sighs with the burden of releasing its tales for just a moment. You find yourself drawn back toward the entrance, walking slower. Now deliberately, your footsteps careful, so as not to disturb the solemn quietude settling in. The gas lamps burn a little lower, casting a gentle warm glow that soothes rather than stirs. Somewhere above the rafters, creak gently, almost a conversation, with the whispering wind just outside. As you approach the doorway, the air feels cooler, carrying with it the fresh scent of petrichor. The night's whispers have drawn back, leaving behind a stillness that fills the broader spaces of this old place. You pause for a moment, taking in the texture of the old wood beneath your fingers, the solid, enduring material that has held these stories together through decades. The lights remaining through the hallway now resemble a line of comforting beacons, suggesting that perhaps even in forgotten places, there can be hope, possibility, and remembrance. The voices of the children and the elderly are never truly silent, nor their stories completely lost. They persist in the corners of memory, recalled in quiet moments like these. And so, as the journey settles and your pulse quiets to match the soft breaths of the sleeping world, you feel the gentle embrace of rest finally take over. Let your mind wander freely, with its own tales to explore, as the last echoes of our journey gently fade away.